It's interesting how things fluctuate because for some time now, even in the face of things that would really get to me,
Mhm.
um, things really don't get to me. I mean, if
Yeah.
they do, it doesn't tend to have the intensity or duration that I'm used to it having. And apparently, things are different enough now that even a week or two ago, Susanna mentioned to me that I really don't get angry anymore.
Mm.
I
Amazing.
might get annoyed for a moment, but that's about it.
Yeah.
Um, and then this last week, um, and I don't know if it's um, any of a number of possible variables, but things really started to, if it kind of felt like things were beginning to get chaotic. And I mean, nothing had really changed.
Mhm.
So, I mean, things have been kind of chaotic for a while. And, but it started to feel like things were getting chaotic. It started to feel like, things started to stick. Like, for example, sometime in the last week, um, Tuesday got really upset because she was convinced I went and ate some chips of hers, which I didn't.
Yeah.
And what provoked what gave it its stickiness was that one, she was still going on about it the next day,
Mm.
and she had accused me of lying.
Mm.
Yeah, she said that I was outright lying. Like, no, and then 3 or 4 days went by, and then the same thing. I hear her telling Suzanne, he went and ate my chips and blah blah blah, and I know he's lying. He's lying to you. So anyway, uh, that and I don't know why, and I didn't take the time to look to find out why. Um, I just kind of got lost in things, and I was aware of the fact that this wasn't really rolling off my back the way things have seemed
Mm.
to for a while, and it's not a case of, oh, what's wrong? There's a problem. Um, it's just simply that it's nice when you can be in the midst of the kind of nonsense that's been showing up here so regularly for a while now, and not be too troubled by it or too affected by it,
Absolutely.
you know.
Well, I'm curious, have you had anything recently up until then where she accused you or somebody else accused you of lying?
I feel like she has, but it's been long enough that I can't remember what it was. And I don't remember how I reacted. I I'm sure that it was something that carried a little more weight
Hmm.
than, say, accusing me of okay, well, like accusing me of eating something of hers, but without the lying part of it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, well, she thinks I did that. I didn't. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I guess that's something you're going to have to deal with.
Yeah.
But then you add the lie part to it, and it gets an extra oomph.
Exactly. So, and my question is then, what do you feel? What does actually happen? What goes through your mind when somebody accuses you of lying? When you feel that you aren't?
Well, I think it's worth mentioning that I would rather tell the truth about something and take the heat for it
Hmm.
than lie and carry that around with me,
Hmm.
and as well as possibly um, affect a relationship.
Hmm.
And I mean, there are a lot of reasons for why that principle or that value is important. But um, I think one of the things that is a central point in that particular program is that my best friend when I was in grade school, middle school, high school, we had shared the cost of something, and then I wound up taking a portion of what we shared, and I lied to him about it,
Mm.
and he knew it. Even though I was telling him, no, this is what happened. I'm sorry. He knew it, and I could tell he knew it,
Yeah, yeah.
and that completely changed our relationship. That was never the same again.
Yep.
That relationship was altered to the point that um, what we had shared as friends was gone, and it could never get that back.
Yep.
Um, and so that's one of those things that kind of sticks with me. And like I said, I'd rather take the heat than affect a relationship.
I get that, and that's really commendable. So the question is then, what do you feel when somebody does accuse you of lying?
Um, I guess it feels like my credibility is being threatened. My ability to be trusted,
Why is that important?
because there's a great deal to be said for being able to have something happen and be asked about it, or to say something about it, and know that people will take you at your word. They know that you're reliable to that degree. Um, Whereas if you don't take care of that, that suffers. People will question you. People will doubt you. People won't trust you. And, there's some things you can lose and regain, and you can even regain that, but still, it's never the same once you cross that line. Even if you manage to over a long period of time get your credibility back, for some people there's always going to be that awareness of, well, you know, yeah, they're honest, you can count on them, but there was that one time,
Mhm.
you
Which
know,
is, which is a good reason not to lie, but there's no way to change somebody else's perception of whether you're lying or not.
yeah,
That's
you're right,
totally out of your hands.
yeah,
So your ultimate credibility does not lie in the truth of whether you are a credible person or not. It only
hmm,
lies in the perception of the other person as to whether you're a credible person or not.
hmm.
So what does that make you feel? What
Okay.
triggered with that
Hmm.
inability to actually affect the perception of other people towards your credibility?
Hmm. Hmm. I don't know how to describe the feeling.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay.
I mean, because I can kind of sense what that feeling is, and I don't know what the word for it would be, but I can say that there is kind of there's something along the lines of a sense of loss,
Mm.
as well as a see sense of loss and a powerlessness or helplessness
Yeah.
with regard to um, being able um, to to be trusted.
Yeah. Yeah. So can you accept that that feeling of powerlessness and helplessness is there? Can you fully feel it? Not just in the kind of peripheral sense of, yeah, I think there might be something in the background, but like open your senses to really fully experience what is arising in the body that gets that label that, oh, this is the feeling of helplessness, or this is the feeling of losing credibility. This is the feeling of untrustworthiness. This is the feeling of unsafety because I am not able to have people really believe that I'm as honest and trustworthy as I think I am. And that puts me at a disadvantage. Feel all of that as the raw vibrational, energetic experience of what's there.
Hmm.
If Tuesday thinks that you ate her chips and you didn't, and this sensation arises when she accuses you of lying, what is the big deal? Does this sensation actually prove that you are in danger because she doesn't trust you? Does this sensation make it so that you will do or say or act any differently in order to change her perception of you?
Well, and there's nothing I can do to change her perception.
No. Can that sensation actively change her perception?
No,
So, what is the point of it? What is
no.
really happening right here? It's a very old alarm sort of a reaction. It's something coming up where you feel unsafe in a certain way. And so the body responds in kind. Do you have to do something about that? You know, the
Hmm.
the reactivity that you experienced was because that was too uncomfortable to be with for a moment. So coming back down, feeling that raw energetic movement that's there right now, without even considering that it is unsafety or untrustworthiness or any of those labels, with it as it is, why can you not have a perfectly normal conversation, allowing her to think what she thinks, allowing you to think what you think, and have this sensation just be there without attributing more to it than it contains?
There's no reason other than just the fact that 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 is a habit
Hmm.
to have a sensation in the body and then have some idea about it,
Yep.
uh, and feel that you have to move to do something. It's just habit. I can't see anything else but habit.
It's not. But this is why we have to recondition the system so that this is no longer a habit. Because
Yeah.
it's like any other habit. We can justify it, we can maybe explain why it's there, but it doesn't mean we have to just blindly continue it. We can, every time we notice it, become aware of it, and then question whether this habit is something we actually need and is beneficial in our life. In
Yeah.
certain circumstances, you feel unsafe or something, and that's a good thing to become aware of. We don't want to be one of those people who has absolutely no sense of danger, but at the same time, it's overly sensitive. When
Yeah.
somebody accuses you of eating chips that you didn't eat, okay. You see the different layers of thought that have to go into that to extrapolate out from she thinks you ate her chips, thereby you are in an unsafe situation because she does not find you trustworthy. And that gets extrapolated to much bigger situations than just the eating of chips.
Well, and the funny thing is that as far as feeling like there's some kind of threat with regards to the relationship with her, I mean that's already pretty much kind of toasted anyway. Between her boyfriend doing things to try to drive a wedge and the stuff she hears on YouTube, that is that plays a very central role in her life in terms of forming her beliefs and values. Um, until maybe she grows up and matures some, that
Yep.
that relationship is. I mean, it's funny. She still wants a parent. She'll still seek me out for things,
Yeah, of course.
but at the same time, you know, she's got this idea of me as somebody who's just this really terrible person. Okay, well, I hope it's a long and healthy hate.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you can't really do anything about it. You know, her perception is going to be her perception. You can always, I think this is just universal. We all can always strive to be more and more aware of our behavior, to find out what kind of subtle micro cues we're giving, that even if I feel like I'm being as
Hmm.
congenial and loving and kind and all of that as possible, is there something that is being picked up on in some way that's, you know, maybe belying some other level of um, processing that's going on in there? We can all become aware of that. Nobody's perception is accurate of us, but they're, it's being based on some cues, right? It doesn't happen in a complete vacuum. So for us to be aware of, well, in what ways then might I be acting that I might not feel that I'm actively being antagonistic or rude or whatever else, but the more aware we are of facial features and postures and body language and word choice and all of that, the more we can see that, well, actually, there might be a little bit something underneath there that I wasn't even really fully aware of, but that they're able to pick up on. And then they are making a whole other story out of that. And then that becomes their perception of you. We weren't even aware of it. We all have those blind spots. So we, instead of always thinking of ourselves as like, well, I know I'm a good person. I'm doing, she can think whatever she wants, all of that. It's still good to keep being introspective in that way and see, okay, but, I believe fundamentally I'm a good person, but in other, what ways might I be contributing, even unconsciously, to the perceptions that she is picking up on?
Well, then I guess there's a lot of value in the fact that because of the way that she will misinterpret things,
Mhm.
and I mean she really does. Maybe Susanna's been witness to this on more than one occasion. Something is said or done that is completely turned into. I mean, it's very far removed from what was actually done and or said.
Mhm.
And so, for some time now, I have gotten to a point of kind of walking on eggshells, but it's a walking on eggshells that's conscious rather than unconscious.
Mhm.
I'm aware of it, and there's a fair degree of what we call choice
Mhm.
in doing so. And it's made me really much more aware of what I say and how I say it, and to a lesser extent, you know, body language and signals of that sort, and intentions.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and I've spoken with Susanna about this, and she'll say things about something along the lines of, "Well, I'm sorry that that's how things are," and my response has always been, "Well, that's how it is right now."
Yeah.
And I don't feel too greatly disturbed by it, but to see that it actually, and this hadn't occurred to me until now, that there is some value in walking on eggshells. you know,
In theory, yeah, the kind of mindful part of it can actually be useful. The fear part of it, or the it's like meta awareness is really helpful to have, right? It's what we're developing when we do mindfulness meditation, all that stuff. That's super helpful to have when it is coming from that kind of impartial awareness. So walking on eggshells in terms of being aware of your facial features and the tone of voice and the word choice and the thoughts that are going in the mind and those little like subtle uh Tuesday says something, you feel this subtle emotional posture or emotion reaction that happens in the body, and instead of saying whatever it is that you would have said 3 years ago, it's like, okay, there's kind of a holding back, there's a recalibrating, and they're saying something else. Being aware of all of that is good, but when you are doing it all out of like a fear of repercussion or a sense of um having to kind of mitigate the damage of any situation or any interaction that you have, it's reinforcing the kind of selfing module
Uh,
that's undercutting all this.
yeah,
So it's
I
like
see that.
we can be aware without it being self-referential and kind of manipulative in that way. And that's kind of the distinction between like living a mindful life versus walking on eggshells. Because it's like when you walk on eggshells, you're intentionally not doing things, or you are intentionally evaluating your words and your postures and stuff in kind of an inauthentic way. You're aware of what it
Uh,
is, but you're also, mediating what you do or say based on what you think is going to be the proper situation, the proper how it's going to be interpreted by the other person, and that may or may not be true. So, so yeah, having the kind of mindful aspect of it, great. Having the manipulative sort of selfing aspect that kind of coats it, less productive.
well, does it seem out of reach or unrealistic to learn to do that without the fear?
No,
I mean, because
not
it's
at
going to
all.
come up.
Yeah, yeah.
Might as well try to, um, to have that experience as skillfully as possible.
Yeah, no, it's the difference of just going into the okay, so say you're leaving the room, you know you're going to talk to her about something, and you automatically start feeling a sensation of like, fear, eggshell walking about to happen. You're going to encounter
Mhm.
her. You immediately anticipate that it might go sideways.
Okay.
Right then, take that completely dispassionate meta awareness approach of the sensations in the body. Just notice, oh, interesting. There's this what we call fear, anxiety kind of a situation, but we're not going to call it that. We're just going to sit or stand or walk with that tone in the body. We just notice it. As you get into the interaction, having the awareness of, okay, so sensations are coming from the body. Wonderful. I'm aware of them. It's not what I think they are. I don't think this is actually fear. I don't think I'm in a dangerous situation. Like recognizing that even if she thinks that you're an idiot or a liar or whatever else, it doesn't matter, right? It's not physically dangerous. It's not impactful in the way that you're reacting or anticipating. You go into the situation and we want to become mindful of how much you are coloring or anticipating your perception of what you're hearing from her. So she says something. How much are you baking in your prior assumptions and prior experiences with her into your interpretation of what you're hearing? How are you interpreting her body language, her facial expressions, all of that stuff? How much is that immediately turned into something about me? When she is upset because her chips were eaten and she accuses you, how, feel how that immediately gets latched onto and taken to be about that self-referential me who's in there, who is being blamed for having eaten chips that I didn't eat,
Yeah.
right? Being aware of all of the little like micro expressions that are going on, of the little micro emotions that we feel when she says, "You ate my chips." I guarantee there is like a flurry of quick little, thoughts, little micro expressions in the face that you're being blamed for something you didn't do, feeling of being judged, authority issues, all these other things probably cascade in really quickly, and
Mhm.
you get these experiences. Then notice what's happening in the body. Notice how that's impacting the felt sense. Do you feel that you're in danger? Do you feel unsafe? Like, what is actually happening in the moment in real time? Checking in with thoughts again, being aware of any impulse to respond a certain way or to even defend yourself, right? All of those things are coming from this same self-referential protective place. So being aware of as you're saying, no, I'm sorry, I didn't do it. I don't know where your chips went, but I didn't do it. Is there a defensiveness? Is there, are you manipulating or sculpting the way that you explain it because you are trying to get something out of it? It's like staying aware of all of these little impulses as they happen starts to break down the believability that it's actually about the me that it seems to be about. Do you know?
Okay.
It's like it takes away that um, the sort of sting of personality that's in the middle of it, and then you don't have that. Even if the fear sensation is still lingering, we're on that meta awareness level where it's okay. Her being upset is okay. You're feeling accused and all of that as these things are happening. It's just this natural biological reaction based on all of your past histories. They bubble up. It's okay. Can you be aware of it without buying into it and adding to the story? You know, your conditioning will happen, right? Like memories will happen. You've been accused of things in the past and all of that. So those things will happen. Your issue with authority and all that will happen. But we don't have to act out of that. We can remain aware that this is just a Rube Goldberg machine that goes off every time I'm in this situation.
Um, how important is it to understand some, I don't think it's possible to know all, but to understand or be aware of um, those things that put this program in place and um, gave it life, make it run. I mean, is there any value in that, or is it kind of that's old news? We don't even need to go there.
It's more that it helps you to have like a cognitive understanding of the impersonal nature of it.
Huh.
Right. Most of us, especially if we're not doing this kind of work, we just feel like, I am the way that I am. I have reactive patterns. Whether you know it or not, it's like, but that's me. I react this way in a certain situation. And even if you are aware of, yeah, I had a traumatic experience when I was 6, and because of that, every time I'm in this situation, I have a traumatic response to it. So I either avoid those situations or I'm going to, have this experience. Even knowing that then doesn't actually make a difference because you still feel fully identified with the experience that happened then. It literally happened to me, and that is the reason why I feel and respond the way that I do now in all of these situations. That's reifying the self, it's reifying the one who experienced it and justifying why this reaction happens now. If you so by coming from the kind of non-dual, non-self angle, we recognize that all more as an impersonal system of causes and conditions, then yeah, knowing there was a traumatic experience at the age of 6, it instilled this belief that the world is unsafe. And now I'm aware of all of the times in life where that feeling of unsafety arises, the things that trigger it, but it's not a personal thing where this is me and it's the way I've always been and it's the way I'm always going to be and it's blah blah blah. This is where we are aware of the sort of impersonal clockwork nature of it, which can give us a cognitive understanding of like, okay, so it's not my fault that I respond in this kind of a situation the way that I do. It was a chain of events that have led up to this biological organism, curling into a ball when it hears fireworks, right? Whatever it is, it's like this is a biological thing. It's not my personal failing. It's not something that, is happening to me that I need to fix or, point, point, point. It's just, okay, I can see how this mechanism is going on now. If you don't know what that original traumatic experience was, it's fine. It doesn't matter. You can still absolutely work without that because it's
Okay.
really about what is actually happening now in this moment. how much am I putting on it with those beliefs about the personal, true, real nature of it? Um, and instead, uh, the the best thing that we can do is to be aware in any moment of the thoughts which are trying to create levels of identification on top of this just natural biological response to a situation. In other words, there are thoughts which are making something that is completely conditioned feel personal. So we want to be
Ah,
aware of what those thoughts are that are making this particular moment feel personal, that are making this reaction feel personal, that are, I'm feeling a sense of shame because I'm curling up in a ball and there are fireworks going again. Whatever your thing is, whatever the trigger is and whatever the reaction is, we want to become aware of those different levels that are happening now that make it feel personal, as opposed to just, yeah, I don't know exactly why this has been a constant reaction, but now I can notice, do I actually have to respond in that way? If we can consciously be aware of the sounds of fireworks, and we can consciously be aware of the contractions in the body when we hear fireworks, and that feeling of unsafety that's there, now can we lovingly, compassionately be with that feeling of unsafety and reassure this system that no, it's actually safe. That is just gunpowder going off in the sky and people are going ooh and ah, and it's quite lovely. If you can have that kind of relationship to it, you can retrain the system because it wasn't always reactive to fireworks. It learned at some point that there's danger with a sound that goes bang. It has baked that into the system. So when it hears that sound, it falsely attributes it with something dangerous. The body responds as though you're in danger, and then everything is all the ball is rolling. So we, as much as possible, come back to the stark reality of each aspect of the situation. There is sensation in the body. It feels like fear or what I associate with fear. I can feel just that fear response in the body. I can breathe. I can feel that I'm safe. I can tell myself that I'm safe. I can recognize that boom is not anything dangerous. It was an intentional thing that somebody did for the sake of a art in the sky. You can reframe it cognitively. You can reframe what you're feeling, and you can feel that separation so that over time, you're going to get less and less, have less and less of those associations with the fear response with something which is unrelated. And it's effectively what we do with everything, but just noticing it for people who don't do this kind of work, it's often harder because there's so much identification to the entire experience. It's like happening as one unit. There's no thoughts that are kind of separate from the sensations or the emotions or anything else. It's like one giant, trauma response of an experience. And the more we do this and the more we build up that meta awareness, the more able we are to recognize, okay, but this part of it is a thought. This part of it is a memory image that's showing up in the mind. This part is self-talk. This part is actually just sensation in the abdomen. This part is clenching of the fist and just feeling the tension in the fist. This part is feeling like I want to cry. This part is, and then like noticing all the individual pieces start to break down that whole of a trauma experience into much more manageable pieces that kind of collapse the edifice of what we thought all of that meant. That is that.
yeah, yeah. I'm just trying to take it all in, and distill it down to um, the the core components. So it's enough to in a situation where someone feels like I've been dishonest to recognize that, first of all, like you were saying, being aware of the sensations in the body and then all of the mental activity, and then to reframe that situation and recognize, okay, they feel I've been dishonest with them, but the result of this will not be something as dire and life changing, potentially life changing as that incident that happened when I was in high school,
Yep.
where I was accused of dishonesty and the results of that. Um, well, they were kind of bad, but it could have been a lot worse.
Mm.
um, so it's enough to do those things and then reframe it. If I'm understanding how you're saying to reframe it, to to let the mind know they think you've lied, you haven't, but you don't have to worry about something really, really awful happening as a result of this.
Right. Yeah. It's like you can, I know that I'm telling the truth.
Mhm.
Safe. I'm safe in having told the truth. What is interpreted from out there is whatever's interpreted from out there. But you know in you that you are doing the right thing. As long as you have that conviction in you, you can tell yourself, I am safe because I am being honest. I'm telling the truth and I'm safe.
Well, and even if that person believes I have been dishonest with them,
Yep.
the worst that can happen is not anything that is remotely along or close to what I was facing when I was 16.
No. No.
But what I mean is
Yeah.
that's part of the process is to tell myself that, to understand. In other words, it's not just enough to say I'm safe. It's in order for this reconditioning to really be effective, I need to point out to the mind that there's not some sort of really profound threat associated with this.
No, no. I mean, Tuesday thinking that you ate her chips doesn't quite equate in the long run to, you know, anything's happened before. Even if we're in a situation where, the cops accuse you of doing something you didn't do and they tell you that you lied and all of that, having that conviction that at least you have told the truth. In you, there's an inner coherence, right? Or consistency. Like it's not quite the word I'm looking for, but there's no it's like an inner consonance. You're that whatever happens, because we ultimately have to be equanimous with anything that happens. You get falsely imprisoned and put in jail for 40 years. It is what's happening. So we need to find acceptance even in those situations. But up until that point, you are everywhere along the line finding acceptance in, okay, she thinks I lied. The cop thinks I lied. I know that I didn't lie. Having that acceptance of this is my truth. I believe that I did not lie. I believe that I didn't do anything wrong. I can accept then that the world is filled with people who have alternate viewpoints. Some of those are going to contradict with my viewpoints. I know that I am confident and comfortable in the fact that I did the right thing and I did not lie. Whatever happens beyond that is out of my hands, basically.
Well, it's kind of uncanny that you picked the second example that you did because that's what I was dealing with when I was 16 was
Right.
a detective who I don't even know how I got on his radar. I mean, that was probably one of the things that made the whole thing so much more disturbing was he just kind of showed up in my life out of nowhere. And
Weird.
I've done some things, and it's funny because kind of came to find out. I guess it was about a year or two later. Um, there was a group of kids that were in my neighborhood that
Mm.
were responsible for it, and I found out, and kind of wanted to kill him because it's sort of like, well, great guys, wound up rolling over into my life. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Uh, but yeah, he zeroed in on me and was
Yep.
determined to try to you know how you see it on TV where the detectives will decide somebody's done something even though they haven't, and they're going to try to
Oh
make
yeah.
fit their narrative, and that's what he was doing. He was
Yep.
just determined, and he wound up. and I've mentioned this to you before, so if I'm repeating myself, pardon me, but he wound up conspiring with my mom, and I was out of school because I mean I was truant, as they say, because I was getting beat up every day before first period and stuffed in my locker and this kind of stuff, and no one could seem to do anything about it.
Funny
And
how.
so I quit going to school, and he wound up selling my mom on this idea that she wouldn't have to continue to pay the fees and have all the things happen that were happening because I wasn't going to school if they could, the two of them could enact this little plan where um, myself and a couple of my friends, being the little pyromaniacs that we were like blowing up, heating up and exploding things like Lysol and spray paint cans.
Yeah.
And we built some kind of thing out of wood and then set it on fire. And so I wound up getting sent to juvenile hall for 6 weeks for the charge was manufacture of incendiary devices.
Wow. That's a very highfalutin title for a Lysol can. And
Yeah, and spray paint cans and big wooden ship and um, so yeah, I wound up getting hauled out of high school during PE one day, and wound up spending 6 weeks there over this. So he finally got what he wanted, I guess, because after that, I didn't really ever hear from him. And, he seemed to no longer be interested in me. Um, but it has left its mark. And I didn't make the connection until we're talking about it here today. But I know that oftentimes if I'm watching something and seeing somebody go to jail, especially if it's for something they didn't do,
Yep.
then there's a reaction. And one of my big fears to this day is being incarcerated. And
Yep.
as a kind of an addendum to that, when I was in my mid 20s, and I had paid for something at the store with a check, and the cashier had written down my phone number incorrectly,
Mhm.
and so they tried to contact me to let me know that this check for like $20
Yeah.
and it was a hot check, which I didn't mean to do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I roll through this stop sign instead of coming to a complete stop. Cop pulls me over, and right then and there they take me in. And I got out later that evening. I wasn't in long, but still,
Yeah.
and that seems to have played a role in reinforcing that whole thing.
I get that.
Because
Yeah.
look at how even if you're innocent. I mean, yeah, the check, I did write a check and it wound up bouncing, but the whole thing was unintentional. It wasn't a case of,
Yeah.
knowingly doing this.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and then, they couldn't contact me to say, hey, you need to come pay this.
Yeah.
So point is there's this idea in the mind of how unpredictable um, these things are, how you can be minding your own business and not doing anything wrong. And it kind of makes life seem like uh, the trial by Kafka.
Yeah. 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 I think that
So,
a lot of people.
huh?
I think that's resonated with a lot of people. I think
Yeah,
a lot of people have had that experience with authority and bureaucracy.
yeah. So I wind up feeling like Mr. K,
Completely.
um, and it kind of ties into something I'd written to you about earlier this week, and I can't remember. Hang on a minute, because I printed it out. I tend to print these things out so I can reread them. Let me see. Um, Yeah, yeah. I'd written to you in the email about how there's this fear that that it's not an anxiety or panic type of fear, but a fear that creates the belief in the sense that life can't be trusted.
Yeah.
And that came up, and I was very aware of it. I mean, you'd think that I would be aware of that already, considering all the things that we've discussed over time, but it really wasn't something that had been
Yeah.
fully seen and that there was a full consciousness of.
Yep.
And so that became clear. Um, I don't know what I was doing, how it happened. It was probably taking the time to sit with. In fact, I'm sure it was sitting with some sort of sensation that had come up in the body, and now it's coming back to me as I talk about it.
Mhm.
And in feeling it, I wasn't looking for anything. I was just feeling it. Like, just feel this. keep feeling it. It eventually will pass. Just stay with it. And then, boop, out of nowhere comes this, wow, I can't trust life.
Yeah.
And so it was really clear that's what that feeling was telling me was that, you know, that kind of sensation is associated with this mistrust in life.
So I was going to say, when you have that boop, that comes up, how is it how is it understood? How is it displayed? Is it like an auditory thought where you hear yourself say, I can't trust life?
In
Is
this
it
case, it was.
in that case? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know about other cases. I can't recall right now, but in that one, it showed up actually as a sentence that, that was heard in the mind.
And what was happening before that? So you're sitting with sensation
See?
of some,
Right.
and were there like was there like corroborating evidence, like corroborating memories that have popped up of like times when you have not been safe in life, or other world events that prove how unsafe the world is that get equated with this sensation in the body?
If I say I'm going to be stretching it because I can't really say with any certainty. The only thing I can say for sure was sitting with this sensation and that thought came up. Now I can say this though. Um, this may not be very satisfactory for most people as corroborating evidence, but there will be times when I'm doing something like that and something will show up and there's not this resonance. It's just there's a sensation and there's a thought.
Yep.
And I've noticed over the years that when that thought is about something that's felt, that there's this kind of resonance. And so
Yeah.
when that thought showed up, it was taken seriously because that resonance was very much there.
Yeah, so there's a strong correlation between the two. It's not, you know, I would say that most of the time when we have thoughts that have any sort of emotional or kind of meaning aspect to them, it's because there is some sort of a resonant feeling in the body that's contributing to that. The question is why this one is more believable, right? Like, is it the strength of the sensation that goes along with that feeling of unsafety? Um, you did say there's kind of this ever-present nature to the feeling of unsafety. So do you have that feeling in the body like all the time?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I don't think so. At one point in time, I think I must have, because I think that was what I was, in years past, what I was trying to numb out
Mm.
with, various things. Um, but I think now that there are periods where, as far as I can tell, I'm not feeling that mistrust in life. So and now that you've asked the question, it has me wondering, and so it's something I'm going to pay attention to see what I can find there. Godfrey, for crying out loud, dog, dude! I've never heard anyone scratch so loud in my life. But anyway, I I don't know that it is. I don't think so. But at the same time, it's something I'll have to look into in order to really be able to say definitively.
Yeah, because I would be curious, you know, we're quick to attribute labels to things like that they are ever, ever present. But are they really? It's just that every now and then we notice it, so we kind of assume that it's there all the time, or
Ah,
it's relatively frequently, but maybe it's only every time that I'm thinking about a particular topic or a particular, like, the feeling of like unsafety is one of those things that there can be so many different routes into. We can look around, and whether it's geopolitical or whether it's health related or aging related or financial or status in society or any other number of things, right? They're all things that we can attribute to the idea of unsafety. So that can be reinforced frequently as you go about your day and you hear the news or you think of something or you have a cough or whatever it is. that can, if there's a core of unsafety there, a belief in unsafety, each of those kind of filters into that main, central root and can give you a little chime of that sensation. And if that's going on, then yeah, you might multiple times a day have something similar to that. And then it's just assumed that it's like there all the time. But there's really the underlying belief in unsafety, right? You have a starting point that the world is unsafe. And from that, you find corroborating evidence all over the place. Because anything that gives you even a tiny little glimmer of that sensation is proof that, yeah, see, I was right. The world is unsafe. I'm in danger.
Yeah.
I'm in danger. Yeah, go me. Um, feels good to be right. So becoming aware goes a very long way in recognizing every time one of those little beliefs gets triggered, and you feel that little resonance of sensation that says, yeah, yeah, see, unsafe, unsafe. And like we do with everything, coming back to being with the raw sensation in the body robs it of its power. It robs it of its association with unsafe
Huh.
because it's just, this sensation effectively. Um,
Well, oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were pausing.
I am. Go ahead.
Well, I have to think that it's not there all the time because if I reflect on laying in bed at night reading before going to sleep, or laying in bed more in the morning when I've woken up, and I'm just kind of laying there and um, uh, considering getting up or whatever might be on the mind, those are times where, and there are other times too that I can think of where I recognize that I'm okay, I'm content, I'm at ease. And it stands out. It's really conspicuous because there was a time when that was not the case.
Mhm.
There was a time when I was ill at ease in this body, in the world,
Yeah.
a, a, a great deal of the time. And
Mhm.
that's not the case anymore. So it's something that really stands out because I recognize, wow, I'm content, I'm at ease.
Amazing.
So yeah, I mean, my strong hunch is that no, it's not there all the time.
Good.
I mean, it's something I'm going to pay attention to, but I feel pretty sure what I'm going to find out.
Yeah. So notice anytime something brings up one of those feelings of unease or unsafety.
Hmm.
And in that moment, you can, challenge it is really the important thing, right? So you look around the room and you notice, am I in physical danger right now? No. Right? Generally, the answer is most of the time going to be no. So in that, you tell yourself, I am safe. Find the stability in the room around you. Find the safety in the room around you. Recognize that you can anchor in that safety, and it gives that feeling of unease just a moment to just flush through this through the body, right? It's a hormonal reaction. You get a rush of adrenaline and other things that run through the body. Just needs a few seconds to play itself back out and get react absorbed and broken down.
Okay.
In that time, you are anchoring in the reality of the moment, which is not in the product of thought.
What anchor in reality? Can you repeat that exact
Yeah,
sentence?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So you are anchoring in the reality of the moment, which is not a product of thought.
Okay. Wow, that's a great way to say that.
Thank you.
Okay.
So
Okay.
otherwise, if you have an idea of unsafety, there has to be thought involved unless you are actively in a war zone or something where you are actively running for your life right now, which usually isn't the case.
Right.
Even if, you have stage 4 cancer and you're lying in a hospital bed, you're not in that moment dying any more than anybody else.
Hmm.
You aren't. actively in more danger than anybody else in that moment. You're actually lying in a hospital bed, which arguably is one of the safer places to be in terms of, medical care being right there, right? So questioning every assumption that pops up as a thought and coming back to, now, actually, I'm in a safe hospital room. I have a TV, I have AC, I have food, I have water, I have people attending to me, there are monitors on. I'm breathing, the heart is pumping, everything is functioning. Okay, I'm safe. In this moment, the reality of the moment is I'm safe. None of us can guarantee that it's going to stay that way, but that's the point. The mind can always come up with an idea of a time when it's not. That time, and the mind doesn't know if that time is in the next 5 minutes or in the next 50 years. So we keep coming back to what is actually here in the room around us and remind ourselves, I am safe. Even when those sensations are in the body, most importantly, when those sensations are in the body, you want to remind yourself that you are safe because you want to break that connection of the idea is that when those sensations are there, it means that you are actually unsafe, right? They're being interpreted as being true.
Okay.
I feel a sense of unsafety all the time. Ipso facto, I must be unsafe all the time. But it's not. It just means that the body is on alert. Your nervous system is amped up, right? You have a meerkat, response, right? You're like always on the lookout for things. It doesn't mean that you are actually in danger. It just means that your nervous system is amped up and on alert. So can you reach
Right.
your nervous system? Can you breathe deeply? Can you feel your feet on the floor? Can you look around you and notice the safety all around you? Can you find the safety and the calm in the appearance of the body? Even if on the inside it feels a bit turbulent, you still recognize what is actually here and how much of it is the mind which is telling you that you're unsafe in some way, or that this is all a symptom or corroborating evidence of the fact that you must be unsafe.
Hmm. Okay.
And it might be, a very slow process of recalibration and reconditioning, or we might have that kind of insight as we do this about how fraudulent all of those thoughts are, how unreliable and unreal they are, so that the whole edifice of that belief in the thought reality of this moment, of what I think of it, of what I feel about it, of what I believe about it, all of that is just empty. And it's when we get more and more in tune with the thoughts as thoughts and the sensations as sensations that everything is seen for that conditioned emptiness. It has no inherent reality. And then it's just no longer a problem. So it might be a very long path of cognitively reconditioning the system, or it might be a very quick, just seeing straight through to the emptiness of all of it. And either way, it gets you to the same place.
Now, I know what you mean when you say the emptiness of all of it, but um, the way you spoke about emptiness, I don't know why, but for some reason, I didn't really hear in what you said, I didn't really hear, for lack of a better way of putting it, a specific description of what emptiness is.
Yeah, yeah.
And using this as the example, if you could just for a moment say something about um, what that means, what that's pointing to when you say, the emptiness of
Yeah, yeah.
this.
Yeah, it's a good question. They have they all of these things, the thoughts, the sensations are empty of an inherent reality. They're empty of their own inherent nature, right? They're meaning they're all conditioned phenomena.
Okay.
You experience that feeling, that sensation in the body of unsafety because of all of the conditioning that has happened up until that point. And that sensation, when it arises, is not the actual beingness of unsafety. That is a hormonal cocktail. It is a stimulation of nerves, right? It is all of these different compounded parts coming together to create a certain state in the body for a limited period of time. It is conditioned because somebody who, uh, lived in, take the Buddha, right? Like living in a castle, sheltered of absolutely all suffering for the first however many years of his life, probably would not have that same conditioned response to feel unsafe in any given situation, right? It hasn't been programmed into the system. It's not a real thing. It's something which has been learned by this mind-body organism in order to keep itself safe. And the way it's expressed is through this chemical, neurological, biological cocktail of experiences that are then interpreted as meaning, oh, you are unsafe right now. But it has no inherent existence of itself. There's no truth to it. It does not exist permanently. It is created entirely on the basis of all of the learning, all of the interpretations that are being done in that moment that I heard a story on the news today and all of a sudden I feel unsafe. You wouldn't have felt unsafe right now had you not heard that news story. Had you not interpreted that news story in a way that put it in relationship to you and your personal safety and history and current narrative. All of it is built on pieces on pieces on pieces on pieces that are all put together. And then the mind is confabulating all of that into something that it says is, I am unsafe now. So the phenomenological aspect in the body is compounded of so many different aspects. But then the thoughts themselves are also compounded of many different aspects. So they are also empty of their own inherent nature, right? The thoughts are a conditioned habitual pattern, a conditioned habitual response that we have had over the entire course of our lives. The brain is creating this particular thought, not because it's true and not because it's you, but it's something which is arising out of, unfathomable complexity of, the interworking of networks in the brain and trillions of neurons and all these things are happening. And this is thought happens to be what bubbles out of all of it, right? Like we have like 4 pounds of matter in the brain. What it comes up with is I'm unsafe right now. That's 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 the best it does. So when that thought comes up, though, that thought has no inherent reality or truth to its being either. It does not know that this situation is unsafe. It does not know that there is a me here who is actually in danger or unsafe, or who even can be in danger or unsafe. It's proposing that there is, in fact, a me who it's protecting. It's referring to a subject. Who is that subject? That even the idea of subjecthood that it's referring to is itself a conditioned phenomenon, right? We talk all the time that the self is empty of an inherent existence because it's made up of all of these different aggregates of experience. The mind, the thought that arises that talks about that subject is just as much an aggregation of past experiences of neurotransmitters, of the interactions of brain chemistry, the interaction of sensory data coming in through our sense organs and being interpreted, and then these thoughts arising because of that. And the thought itself is this temporary fleeting wisp of a thing which only exists for a moment and then is gone.
Hmm.
So the entire experience is empty of any inherent reality. The experience of I am unsafe has no inherent reality to it because it's based on these concepts that there is a me here who can be unsafe. It's based off of the concept that there is such a thing as being unsafe, which means that there is a separate entity here who is at the mercy of an external world who could endanger it. It's based on an idea of separation and duality, that this is an individual isolated being with certain needs and proclivities and abilities to be harmed separate from the environment around it. And not that actually everything that happens in the environment is also happening in here, and that when anything happens to this part of the environment, the rest of the environment is also implicated. It's also affected by it, right? The When this body dies and breaks back down into the earth, those microorganisms are all just having new lives, right? Like this is mostly bacteria that isn't even human cells, right? The human cells make up the smallest percentage of the human body.
Damn.
We're mostly, bacteria of various types. So that all I know, it's crazy, right?
I wasn't really aware of that
Yeah,
before.
it's true. Yeah. I forget what the exact percentage is, but there are fewer human body cells in the human body than there are bacteria and other microorganisms.
Wow.
So
Okay.
you are more bacteria than you are person. So when that body dies, all of that starts to break down, and the constituent elements go back, and the energy is never destroyed, and all of that, so on and so forth. So the entire process of being unsafe is a conceptual illusion which is empty of any inherent nature. We're falsely identifying one part of the entire totality of everything and saying that part is unsafe compared to everything else. All of it is interwoven. None of it is affected without affecting everything else.
Right.
So we can break down every little bit of thought and sensation and experience and recognize that it is entirely conditioned by conceptualization and that all of it is empty of any inherent reality.
That's a fantastic exposition on emptiness. Um, as you were describing all of that, the one thing that I couldn't escape from, which is probably really obvious to most people, is that in addition to all of those other things, the idea that there's someone here, it seems kind of weird when you consider the fact that going back all the way to the earliest moments of life appearing on this planet, things had to go a certain way, and if one thing was off even the slightest, you wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here. Others would, but you know,
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, we are a very small turn of the dial from everything being different.
yeah.
I mean, when they talk about the like the cosmological constants needing to be a certain way in physics, that our universe is dialed in to like the precise degree where if any one of these constants was just a little bit different, the entire universe would cease to either be, or it would be unstable, or it would be unable to sustain life, or any number of different things. And so some people take that as being like, proof of a divinity or something which has made it, but really it also is why people who believe in the multi-universe theory believe that there are an infinite number of universes. And of course, we happen to appear on one of the ones that can support life. Otherwise, you wouldn't have life popping up in a universe that can't support life. So, but it's that idea that it's like uh, everything is so fine-tuned for the fact that we are able to be here in this particular way, that everything has to be in alignment. Everything has to be in conjunction for this moment to be exactly the way that it is. And as soon as something changes, I mean, you blink and then something is different again. A bug flies from here to there and everything changes. So, well, yeah, no, that's a complete diversion. I'm not going to go down that road.
Okay. Um, so revisiting what we talked about last time and then what was in that email a few days ago or a week ago, whenever. Um, and for the sake of clarity for anyone watching, I think it probably would be worth um, going ahead and including this what we wrote to each other
Yeah.
about.
Uh,
Of course, this is assuming that people have seen the previous video
yeah.
where you suggested looking into what defines good, what defines bad. Well, I guess I was trying to avoid reading the whole thing, but so I've been writing about the question as to what good means as well as bad,
Mm.
and um, considering, reflecting, trying to define these notions seem empty and perhaps a bit silly. And then your response was, as for the defining of good, bad, and good, that's exactly right. They're empty. They're just concepts. But your programming is running as though they're real. However, they're likely either undefined or poorly defined. So you need to first see if you even have a functional definition of these things. And if you don't, then start to actively question those beliefs that you or anyone else could possibly fit into one of these conceptual labels that has no actual definition. We're aiming to recondition the system. And to do that, we need to be very clear of the programming and then feed it contrary signals and undermine its assumptions. And as to see if you even have a functional definition of these things, what happened when I sat down and first started doing that, and I was trying to do it in a fairly concrete way. So I got out this journal that I've been keeping more or less through all of this and tried to write down actual um, definitions, not unlike what you might find in a dictionary.
Yeah.
And it only took just a very short amount of time in trying to do that. What is good? It's and I put down some words, but they sound more like generalities.
Yeah.
And and so yeah, I thought, well, it needs to be more specific. It needs to be more concrete. And I couldn't think of any way to make that possible. So I started thinking about it. I can't remember exactly what the thought was, but I started thinking of it in terms of something other than just a definition. And so when considering it from the point of view of um, when what is happening with me when I perceive someone else as good and label them that way.
Mhm.
And it seemed to me like the idea of good and bad both are really nothing more than ways to label when I feel good about someone else and or they give rise to a good feeling in me. It can
Interesting.
be they did something really commendable and noble, and that was the result of their having integrity and being very ethical and kind, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and so that feels good to see someone in the world like that for
Yeah.
whatever reason. I'll leave that aside for the time being. Or they do something um, for me or with regards to me that gives rise to a feeling of, that warm, fuzzy feeling, for
Yeah.
lack of being clearer about it. And well, human psychology, it makes sense that if somebody does something that causes that warm, fuzzy feeling in you, you're going to see them as good,
Yeah.
that they're going to get that label. So the best I could come up with is that bad and good really have more to do with how a person makes me feel. I mean, obviously they don't make me feel, but just
Yep.
to describe it simply, it's how that person makes me feel. That gets good and bad.
Yeah. Which is one really interesting thing to notice. The other is what you said as you were describing it. And I noticed that it's the person's actions that
Mhm.
are being defined, not the sort of being of the person, right? Meaning you could have somebody, right? You've never met this person before, and all of a sudden you see a dog going running across the street, and this guy like runs out in the middle of traffic and saves the dog from traffic, and you're like, wow, that's warm and fuzzy. That guy really put his life on line for that dog. Great guy. He goes home and he's got like a basement full of humans who he's like, keeping in cages, right? Like
Right.
we don't know. One action does not define the entire character of a person. But
Sure.
when we talked last week or last time, it was kind of like that's a good person. I'm a bad person. There was a distinction between you feeling less than all of these other people who are being defined a certain way, which
Mhm.
makes it sound as though there is a uh, consistency to their character that is always good, and there's maybe a consistency to my character that is always bad. Those are those overgeneralizations because even if you know somebody and every time you interact with them, you have warm and fuzzy feelings because they are doing something that you deem to be good in some way, it doesn't indicate that they actually are that way all the time. It's only when
Right.
interaction with them. So,
And
yeah,
I
go.
was going to say, just so you know, that had occurred to me,
Okay,
although it
good.
didn't come along with the description of them as a serial killer. But I very quickly saw that, yes, it's like that old Walt Whitman line, "On vast I contain multitudes." You know?
Exactly.
And so, yeah, they appear good, but what does the rest of their life look like every day of their life up to this point?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that's where I really want you to dive in a little bit deeper in the assumption that anybody could be inherently good or bad. Because,
Okay.
first of all, your definition of good or bad is basically just the subjective version of whether you feel warm and fuzzy or not.
Right.
So, what does that say outside of your body about what constitutes good or bad?
Okay. That's extremely helpful. But you said something before that about um, defining this, and I know I can go back on the tape and watch that, but it'd be hard to find that exact moment. That will take some doing. So if it's possible, um, do you recall what you said right at the start of that idea? I know. I realize what I'm asking.
Oh, well, let me see. So,
You were
uh,
talking about looking into it, how I needed to look into it more. Uh,
yeah, uh, these things are so fleeting. Um, Give me a minute. I think it will
okay.
come back, but um, not when it's being looked at. It's memories are very shy like that.
Yeah. Okay, so let me see. I'm trying to recall. And then what you said just a minute ago that at the end of that idea. Well, let's try a different approach. You want me to dig into this more deeply.
Yeah,
Um, uh, so what I was doing was fine, and that was um, following your suggestion, but it hasn't been delved into deeply enough in a way that's clearer
yeah,
and more specific. So
yeah. I
how
think
do you want me to go about doing that?
exactly. One of the things that I had said was that what is it that defines good and bad outside of your body? Because right now it's only being defined by how it makes you feel. So objectively, what does good or bad mean? Everybody's going to have their own subjective experience of every situation and every person and every action.
Okay.
So when you have an idea about a person being good or bad, we can't just use your own inner barometer of, I feel warm and fuzzy or I feel kind of icky. because that's just your subjective experience, again, based on all of the conditioning that you've had. It might be that something about the person's facial structure reminds you of a family
Mhm.
member who you didn't get along with, right? It has nothing to do with
Right.
personality. We're putting that on them.
Mm.
Um, to have the idea that a good and bad are inherently existing, or that a person can be entirely good or bad, is such a limited. I mean, like you'd said in one of
Mm.
your emails, that it just seems like, I forget how you put it, but it's like almost a silly thing to do
Mhm.
to try to define that, which is true. But as long as it's, like I said in the email, as long as it's operational, as long as you're still having that belief that somebody could be a good person or a bad person, and that it's not all entirely relative based on your position, that um, that needs to be specifically investigated. So good to come down to, okay, it's how I feel about them warm fuzzy wise, but why why is it that those particular actions trigger your warm fuzzies? Why is saving the dog a good thing as opposed to letting the dog get hit by traffic? Most of us would say that the saving a dog is the morally responsible, ethical, kind thing to do, but there are other people who would disagree with that. So for you, you just need to find out, how exactly are you describing somebody who is good? And notice that that is based off of your conditioning as well,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I kind of, when I was spending some time with this, I kind of touched into that area because I thought about how there are people who would see somebody who is um, really materialistic, self-centered, violent, um, um, harmful to others, etc., and they would think that those are the kinds of traits that a person needs to have.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you only have to spend 5 minutes scrolling on social media, and you'll find that there are people who believe that every sinner is a saint and every saint is a sinner. And, it's like everybody has their own version of who is who. Um, it's a quite an unmanageable mess, but it's because we all have our own interpretations, and there is no such thing as somebody being inherently good or bad. It is all a biased interpretation. So we need to get clear on what that is. And then the question for you is, why, how is that being used as a cudgel against yourself? Because this whole thing started last time when we were talking about everybody else seems to be a good person. I seem to be the bad one. Do you see other people saving dogs while you're throwing them under buses? Like what specifically is it about their actions and about the conditioned morality that has been built up in you that sees something fundamentally broken, flawed, wrong, not good enough about you, that makes you the wrong one and everybody else the good ones? And then challenge that.
So to try to simplify that, the question is, how is it that everyone else is good, or even a lot of other people are good, and
Mhm.
yet somehow I'm bad?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You need to define, the traits that you see in them, and then also define the traits that you see in you, because there has to be a comparison happening,
Say
right?
that last very part again.
There has to be a comparison happening to say that they're good and I'm bad. It's a comparison, it's a judgment. And we have to compare like terms, right?
Come
So
on.
what is it about their behavior that is somehow better or more morally responsible or ethical or whatever than my behavior? And then really find out, is there any truth in that? Do you have a basement full of people? Like what is your actual, experience that is when the mind dredges up that idea about you not being good enough or you being a problem, what is it using to reinforce or corroborate that sentiment?
Huh.
Don't let it be just an unquestioned assumption. What evidence is it providing you?
When you say what evidence is it providing you, what is it? The terms good and bad?
What evidence is the mind providing for why you
Okay.
are good or bad? Is it dredging up old memories of like, oh, but that time you did, oh, remember that other time? And yeah, you really could be more gentle. You really could be more patient. What is coming up that's providing you that evidence of your continued malfeasance?
Okay. Hmm. It's mildly amusing for me that I knew that there was more. There were questions that I wasn't asking or ideas that I was overlooking, and I could not figure out what those were for the life of me.
Right.
And here you are, you know, laying it all out. Okay.
Yeah. So it's really one of those leave no stones unturned situations because just like I talked about in the little preamble to the emptiness thing a little while ago, it's really where it can be a slow, long reconditioning, or we can just see that inherent emptiness of the belief in good, bad, right, wrong, better, worse. All of that can just fundamentally drop away when it's really clearly seen as being totally empty. Not just like sort of conceptually, yeah, I kind of get that drift, but it's like, really gutturally felt that like, oh, yeah, like all of this is empty of any inherent existence. All of this is just a conceptual sham.
It's quite a conceptual sham. I love it.
Okay.
Hmm. Um,
Sorry, I also wanted, I had mentioned, I had wanted to mention this earlier and then we got sidetracked and I forgot. But to this, I think it might also be helpful. So when we were talking earlier about you being triggered by being accused of lying,
mhm.
there is that idea that like, false accusation is an issue. And yeah, you've had, previous history and all that stuff. But it's also always helpful to do the little turnarounds where we go, okay, if I am concerned that they think I am untrustworthy or that I am a liar or I'm not being honest, in what ways am I uh, not being honest or untrustworthy with myself?
Hmm.
There might be something in this situation where you actually are untrustworthy or unhonest in certain ways. And it might be with yourself. It might be also with other people, just not in ways that you are immediately popping to mind.
Oh.
So like instead of um, you know, an overt situation where Tuesday thinks you ate her chips and you didn't, and you know that you're not lying about that. Are there other more small situations where you're being sort of half truthy? You're not fully being honest with other people about something. Either your emotions, your beliefs, your whatever. Is there some little bit where, yeah, it's not an outright complete lie, but there's something where you're still holding back some truth which is making you feel, it's enough to give that resonance of like not wanting to be called out on being dishonest. And it's only being marginally, if at all, recognized.
Hmm. Now, that kind of raises the question of how do we draw the line? Because some people would, I think, very quickly jump to the conclusion that, oh, well, one of the places where I'm not being really honest with myself is that, that my partner or my roommate or my family member um, has these flaws, and I just always keep my mouth shut, but I just need to be honest with them about their flaws, which, there's a reason, a good reason in some cases to not just say anything that comes to mind. That's not being dishonest. That's a certain degree of wisdom, because just because you think something doesn't mean it needs to be expressed out loud to others.
Yes, that is that is also very true. But the the categorization of their flaws is
Hmm.
your own interpretation.
Right. But I mean, as a general idea, do
Yeah,
you get what I'm saying? Because
I
how
do.
do we avoid that?
I do, but I think that's the thing is being aware of like it's not about being uh brutally honest with every thought that comes across the mind and has no consideration for other people's feelings. One of the things is to recognize one of the what I would say is one of the antidotes to that is recognizing that that flaw is only your interpretation. It means that you don't have to be expressing every interpretation that you have because you realize that that is itself your interpretation. Um, the kind of like the kind of dishonesty would be if you are trying to give a good example. If you're holding back on just some sort of, misrepresentation of yourself or misrepresentation of your um, thoughts about a situation or something like that, um, where you maybe don't feel like you are safe to completely express your opinion about something or whatever, where it's like your point about not pointing out flaws on other people. There's a balance where we come in tune between recognizing that um, the thoughts that we have are, as I've said, these subjective experiences which have no inherent truth of their own. And when we do, we might naturally recognize that we don't actually have to express those things externally to others.
Right.
When that is recognized, then there's no inherent discrepancy about not being honest, because then you're just aware of, yeah, but this is just my little bubble of interpretation. There's no reason to say that to somebody. What I'm talking about is more like there's something that really genuinely feels like it needs to be expressed, but there's a hesitation or there's a reluctance because you either are worried about how you're going to be judged for it or, unsafe or something where you're just not being fully honest in a way that it feels like you should, not to tell them that their snoring is driving you crazy or, that they eat too loud or whatever, but something else. And this is just for your, you may or may not have those things, but for your investigation to look at why is it that being told that I'm lying or being perceived as being untrustworthy or dishonest, why is that so triggering? It's usually either because we have had experiences of that in the past, we fear that it's going to happen in the future, but largely, often it happens when we are actually being somewhat dishonest in some aspect of our life, either with other people or with ourselves. That there's at least some marked dishonesty there. to some extent. So of course we're kind of hiding it, and it's like it's a wound, it's a soft spot, a sore spot that becomes very easy to poke. So we protect it all the time. And then if anybody happens to poke into that feeling of dishonesty, yeah, it's there. It's very easy. It's easily injured.
Sounds like what you're saying, to clarify that question, it sounds like what you're saying is um, finding what this point of contention is in here. It's not about something that needs to be said to someone else. It's about something that I need to uncover, and I need to say it to me.
Yeah, you need to acknowledge it. Now, there might be situations where it's like there, okay, so if it's something within you where you're not being honest with yourself, then yes, it absolutely only matters that you say it to yourself. You don't have to tell anybody else. If it's a situation where um, you are you feel unable to be honest with somebody or with anybody. These things can be really pathological like that, where it becomes like, I do not feel comfortable speaking my mind to anybody or being honest with anybody. When that sort of thing happens, it's not just important that you acknowledge to yourself that, yes, well, I would really like to say that I am uncomfortable taking you to the airport at 4 a.m., but here we go. I guess I'm going to do it anyway. um, it's really finding what the barrier is that's keeping you from being honest and expressing, or that your your wife really thinks that you're into one particular type of music, so every time it comes up, you have to go with her to a performance of that particular type of music, and then it's like you just feel bad being honest and be like, honestly, I'm really not that into it, and I'm sorry we've gone to 20 shows and you know, whatever. Like, it can be those little things that actually would be beneficial if you were able to open up about it, because there's something where there's a discrepancy in the system, or an internal resistance in the system, or an incoherency in the system, where part of you, part of that whole, mind body organism feels one way, but does not feel okay to express that. If so, then providing, again, it's not that like you should wear more makeup, unless we want it to be constructive, honest stuff in here, not criticisms and flaws of other people. It's really to find that what we need to say that we are, for whatever reason, not allowing ourselves to say, and then more importantly, even than that, why are we not feeling okay to say it? Where is that feeling of unsafety, or unworthiness, or my feelings aren't valid enough to be respected, or any of that? We want to get down to the bottom of that.
Well, it's interesting that as you're saying this, and this is liable to just be a paranoia and or irrational fear, but as you're saying this, there's this thought of, um, oh God, what if I haven't been honest with myself about something, and to be honest means it's going to be completely life changing, and um, that created a pretty sizable shot of adrenaline into the
Okay.
system.
Okay.
So,
So what if?
well, there's no if about it. I mean, I'm gonna have to be truthful with myself and possibly with someone else about something if that is the case. And, the fear reaction, I think, it's valid to question that, in the sense that just because something comes up, even if it is something significant, doesn't mean that uh, my whole life has to get turned upside down over it. I mean, this very, very possibly could be something. Well, here's another point in your life where you have to practice, whether it's inquiry or working with that thing, whatever it is, in
Yeah.
some way, rather than just okay, well, now my life's going to get turned upside down.
Exactly, exactly. But it's one of those things where instead of conceptualizing the whole thing out to where recognizing this is going to, well, let me say that a different way. It can only do that if you have if you are working it into the conceptual narrative framework idea of your entire life, right? Like, okay, that's still not very
Mm.
clear. You have to have a conceptual idea of what your life has been and is for it to be able to be turned upside down by a new bit of information, a new insight. What is here is a temporary state. What is here is not something that has always been here, right? Darrell's life, as we call it, has been many different things over the period of the recent decade,
Yeah.
right? The idea that everything is going to be turned upside down relies on the idea that there is like one cohesive narrative that is informing the way that this moment is. Um, you know, I am a uh, straight conservative white male, blah 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 blah, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh wait a minute, I'm gay and actually I'm a little bit liberal. Like all of a sudden, but that's because you have been defining yourself by this overarching long framework which does not actually exist. Again, it's empty of any inherent existence. What you have is a conditioned response based on everything else in the universe, and sometimes that will show up differently this moment than it did the moment before. As long as we're flexible and open and not clinging to those mind-based conceptual definitions, that doesn't matter. The whole idea of your life being turned upside down only matters if you're clinging to those definitions of what you believe that you were in the past or how you define yourself. Otherwise, all of this is free to come and go, move and shift and change as the whims happen to move everything.
Hmm.
So instead of just dismissing and not looking into that, because again, we look into everything, feel into that. What is at risk? What is at risk of being lost or changed if there is some new revelation that comes to light that you had no idea of?
Hmm.
Um, all of a sudden, you realize you've been living a lie and you're actually a trans papaya farmer. Like all, all of a sudden, right? This whole thing, what is it that then, even then, is at risk and changing because of that new revelation? Yes, perhaps your living situation will be reevaluated and might be different if that was the case, right? Perhaps the way that you dress or look would change. But fundamentally, underneath that, what about anything here of value actually changes with that revelation?
Hmm. Well, it seems like a huge leap because we're talking about um, being accused of being dishonest about something that is really just silly.
Mhm.
The actual issue at hand, um, and to go from uh, being accused of lying about having someone's potato chips. I mean, you say it out loud, and like, golly,
I know.
this really is just goofy.
But
Um, then to go from that to, well, there's something you're not being honest with or with yourself about, and then there's this fear that I'm going to lose my relationship with Susanna.
yeah,
I mean, that's quite a jump, you
it
know.
it is, but it's because the silliness of the accusation of eating somebody's potato chips is um, the the strength of the reaction that you had to something as silly as being accused of eating somebody's potato chips
Mhm.
indicates that that's just, sort of the tip of the iceberg, right? It's one. If it was seen really as being that silly, then it wouldn't have triggered any sort of internal bodily reaction. That's only coming up because there is something else that is at play. And that something it means that something as silly as being accused of eating chips that you didn't eat is enough to trigger this thing, which means it's a bigger thing. There is something there. And I'm not saying that it means that you are necessarily hiding something from yourself or from other people and you're not being honest. That is a possibility. It could still be from, the high school instance of being accused of things you didn't do and being blamed for it. There can be many different things at play. What you want to do though is, not dismiss them without investigating to find out if there is something there, because it could be a fruitful bit of exploration for you to recognize, oh, actually, I'm not 100% honest, you know, all throughout my life. There are some things that, I really do actually feel kind of uncomfortable with this part of my relationship or this part of my roles in the house, or uncomfortable with this part of my appearance or this part of my personality or this part of something, and I'm just not fully being honest about that thing. If there's any of that, it's still a fruitful place of exploration.
Sure. Well, I'm I'm not going to back down from it.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, I
yeah.
mean,
But
what's ultimately at stake here in terms of the life and existence of this particular being is uh, important enough, worthwhile enough that um, I'm going to go ahead and look into this, and um, with the understanding that I've got to be completely honest with myself. I can't deceive myself or delude myself, no matter how uncomfortable it might be.
yeah,
So I, I'm 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 completely invested, even if the prospect is something that is uh, causes some kind of fear, or discomfort.
yeah, excellent. That is the approach to take. It's just that open curiosity where, eh, with the courage to acknowledge that anything could happen and that you can be with it. You're resilient enough to deal with whatever it is, because it's just going to be some fleeting sensation. It's just going to be some thoughts that are moving in and out, and sometimes faster than you can even catch them and know what they are. Like, there's nothing here to be afraid of.
I like that you said that. I mean, somebody could see this and go, "Well, geez, it wasn't that obvious," but
No,
no, it wasn't really entirely.
no. But that's the point. The brain is so good at creating this kind of reality around everything and making everything feel consequential in the most dire ways, because it deifies everything into some sort of, my reality. And that's why I say we can't take anything for granted. Every concept that we live through can be challenged. You can find that emptiness underneath all of them. That they're conditioned beliefs. They're made of parts. They're made of sensations in the body which come and go and move and change. They're made of thoughts that come and go and move and change. There is no stability or permanence in any of it. And that is where we want to really get in touch with.
Um, well, I guess it shouldn't be too surprising that there is a fear response and the idea of having the life completely altered when we consider where it starts. It starts with being accused of being dishonest, and that um, has the foundation for that. The beginning point for that was um, a series of events in my life when I was much younger that you know, which I already described, the whole thing about, that
Yeah.
detective and um, getting put in juvenile hall, and that also involved, not only did my whole life get changed for 6 weeks anyway, but there was a betrayal on my mom's part when I needed somebody to um, advocate for me
Mhm.
because I was getting beaten up and abused and so forth. Um, and what it all turns into is, 6 weeks in juvenile hall and then a year on, I think it was a year on probation, um, with a probation officer who was pretty much what you'd expect a probation officer to be. Anything I did was automatically suspicious.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, I guess it shouldn't be too surprising that the idea of digging deeper into this business of um, being uncomfortable, ill at ease when being accused of being dishonest uh, gives rise to a pretty strong fear response.
Yeah.
To my mind, there's a direct connection there.
Probably so. Um, so when it happens, again, going back to this kind of emptiness issue that we've been talking about, what's
Hmm.
really key is to recognize I am not in high school right now.
Right,
I do not have a parole officer right now.
right,
None of this situation I'm in right now has any sort of connection to or bears any resemblance to those formative experiences earlier in life. This is a product of it.
right,
The way we experience things now is a direct result of experiences that we've had in the past. And if we take the sort of Bayesian inference, predictive processing idea of the brain, it's creating the moment that you're in right now, which is a prediction based off of its past history of priors. It's,
right,
you know, information that's come in and it's feedback from its own predictions. That being the case, you can see how your reality now is not any more dangerous than um, any other, say anybody else who's in the house with you, right? You're only in awe. You're only interpreting it as dangerous because your brain is using its prior information of danger that it's really when you get accused of doing something that you didn't do or of lying or being dishonest, bad things happen. And so it's constantly projecting, well, in that case, this is danger. We need to do something about it and all of that. It's just, it's the reason why you in that house might feel unsafe when Tuesday accuses you of eating potato chips, whereas somebody else in the house might just laugh and shrug and go, no, I didn't eat your chips. Sorry. And then
right.
absolutely no connection.
Yeah,
Um, so hammering in a gentle way, where we recognize over and over again that this is just the conditioning that's doing it. There's no inherent truth to the danger of being not believed in this case. Anytime you have the slight feeling that arises, when you have that thought that connects it back to high school, breaking that connection by saying that is just a memory. That is just a thought, right? Every time that you continue with that, it propagates. It makes it more likely that you're going to have that in the future. So instead of reinforcing the, okay, I got in trouble then, I'm going to get in trouble in the future scenario, we go, wait a minute, this is completely a different situation. This is totally unrelated. I have had how many times between then and now when I have been accused of being dishonest in some way and didn't end up in juvenile hall or jail, right? We need to recondition the system in that it needs to learn new rules. It needs to learn that being perceived as being dishonest is not necessarily threatening in the way that it was back then. And the more you do that, the more it changes its predictions of the future. Then you can start to get experiences where somebody accuses you of something that you didn't do, and you're honest and say you didn't do it. And whether they believe you or not does not actually matter.
So you said that we need to recondition the mind so that it doesn't extrapolate from that
Yeah.
initial experience to now. And the way that we do that, to make sure I'm understanding and not
Yeah, yeah.
forgetting anything, is one, making it clear this is not then,
Yep.
this is a different time.
Yep.
You're safe.
Yep.
Um, and then I know you've said you've listed or described some other things that need to happen there to recondition it, but I've forgotten what they are.
So one of the things is to uh, recognize how many times it has happened between then and now when you didn't have that experience. Um, that, it's like uh, if you took an elevator when you were 16 and you got trapped, and then you have since taken, roughly 300 elevators and you have never gotten trapped again. You might still, every time you're approaching that elevator, have that lingering anticipation or anxiety that you're going to get trapped again, but you can keep prodding the system with, yes, but this is the 300th time that I have not gotten trapped in an elevator. This is the 301st time that I have not gotten trapped in an elevator. We're changing that assumption so that we're seeing the world through a different lens.
Okay.
Yes, I have been accused 68 times of being dishonest, and yet I'm still not in prison. Nothing bad has actually happened other than some people have certain thoughts about me that I don't believe are true. Okay, right? It's that kind of recognition of that it drops us out of that conditioned idea that we have that because I was had a bad experience when I was younger, that means that I'm just as likely right now to be in just as much danger because these are exactly the same thing. Being accused of eating chips, exactly as bad as being accused by a deputy of doing something I didn't do. We just keep being aware of in the present moment, I am safe. This is not a danger. This is not a threat. I am okay. And then also, I don't think it ever hurts to go down that route of breaking apart the concept of unsafety in general. Just
Oh,
right. If you have an idea that I am unsafe now for any reason, other than if you are actually physically in danger, but having the idea that like if they think bad of me, I'm unsafe. If I don't know, get into a car, I'm inherently unsafe. Whatever the thing is that you have. Constantly questioning, like we did earlier, what are we even talking about in terms of unsafety? Is it this safety of this physical body in terms of its ability to survive for another X number of years? Is it the one who's supposedly believed to be the passenger in the body or the witnesser of it or whatever? If there's any kind of inkling of that self that is actually um, more at risk than the physical body itself, that gives us something to look into. This is how we basically go from one inquiry to another. Because you can really find that it's rarely just one individual concept or experience. It's like a whole nested den of them, and each one kind of builds on the other.
Yeah, and that's something that I I still don't do as well as I feel like is necessary in order to really get results. I mean, I can do some and get some results and find things, but I wish I had the ability on my own to go really deeply and to be able to keep coming up with questions in the way that it happens when I'm in conversation with you.
Yeah,
You
yeah, I
know,
get that.
you've been doing it long enough and are good enough at it that you can keep finding the questions, keep seeing other places where it can be broken down, and I can go up to a certain point and then I kind of hit a wall,
Yeah.
and it's frustrating.
I get that completely. It is the benefit of having one-to-one sessions with people or something like that occasionally because we all have our blind spots, we all have our dead ends, and there it does help to have that little bit of extra perspective or um, yeah, something from somebody else. But I get that. And that is why we also have our, the Discord community and stuff is specifically so that people have a way, if you don't have one-to-one sessions with somebody or somebody who's guiding you like that, to have a support system where you can be like, okay, I'm totally stuck. Where do I go from here? And hopefully somebody else will have that extra little insight that you're missing, that little,
Well, that's kind of that's a good opening into something else that has been um, coming up the last few days. That has been. Hang on a minute. Let me let them out. I don't know what's going on out there, but apparently it's really important.
sure.
Okay, go on. Jeez Louise. Um, it's been something that's been kind of frustrating. Is that here in the last few weeks, um, the willingness, I don't know if it's the willingness, but there hasn't been the kind of um, commitment to um, taking action with regards to this, doing things
Mm.
um, that there had been. I mean, it takes a lot for me to sit down and watch any of the videos, um, or there are other things that I had been doing and now I can't think of what they are. Fortunately, the one thing that always seems to stay intact, even though it hasn't been as consistent through the day as it has been um, prior to the last couple of weeks, is inquiry, investigating, looking into things, taking time to stop and feel into the body. Or if I'm in the middle of something, I can't get away from it, at least I put my attention on that feeling and feel it as fully as I can, even
Nice.
though I'm in that process of doing other things. So the inquiry, the feeling into the body and staying with those sensations, that that still comes up. I mean, like this morning, I was laying there in bed, and all of a sudden, I could see that somehow a decision had been made to get out of bed. And so
Mm.
as soon as it started to happen, I started looking. I started,
Love it.
yeah, there. I have no idea where in the hell that came from. It was just suddenly
Love it.
we're getting up. I
Yep.
could not see what initiated that or how it happened. So
Nope.
looking, inquiring, feeling into things, that all still happens. But this other stuff, um, whether it's watching the videos, participating in Discord, things like that, it it just seems like that for whatever reason, or even watching the one-on-ones with you and I, for a long period of time, I did that.
Yeah,
I did
yeah,
that, several times a week,
yeah.
and and now it's kind of frustrating and discouraging because like the system just doesn't apparently deem that important enough right now. I guess I don't know what's going on.
I mean, it can be lots of things, but you do have a lot of other stuff going on around the house at this point. And it is an investment of mental energy and time and kind of, emotional energy. There's a lot that goes into it that I can see. It's just not the maybe the most valuable use of your energy at this point, or at least the the body doesn't feel like it is, you know.
I was going to
Uh,
say, because I can't think of anything in my life, not to minimize um, Susanna, but or
yeah,
anyone else, but I can't think of anything more important than this work.
but that's the thing is, again, as you said, right, we contain multitudes. So
Yeah.
there is a part of this that doesn't agree with that. There's a part that there's a part
Right.
that holds that sentiment and a part that doesn't. And when you're not watching the stuff, then it's because that other part is outweighed, or the. So you can always look into, is it that it just simply is not happening? It just doesn't cross your mind, never even think of it to join Discord chats or watch videos or any of that. Is it literally just not on the radar? It's just like, it's midnight and you look back and go, oh yeah, never got to that. I never even thought about that today.
No, I think about these things.
Good. So then if that happens, what then happens afterwards? What happens right then? Is there a specific feeling in the body, like a heaviness, a tiredness, some sort of contraction against it? Is it like a body no? Is it like I'm just deflecting to quick get, oh, I've actually got so many other things I should be doing instead, and then you're off to that. Like, what is the actual experience of that? Because that's a different thinking about something and not acting on it is different from that thought just never appearing. And then you're just like, oh yeah, huh. I haven't thought about that in a week. Those are two different experiences. So the good thing is you can investigate when you actually have a thought and then you just don't act on it. What is impeding that action?
Um, when I have noticed so far up to this point, what I frequently encounter is something that just wants to take the path of least resistance. Like, yeah, if I watch the video instead of, say, watching this interview with Rick Beato and David Gilmour,
Excellent, by the
if
way.
I
I'm
do,
a little over halfway through that. Really, really
yeah,
excellent.
it was really good. I have to agree. Actually, a lot better than the first one.
I didn't
Yeah,
see.
he did another one about a year ago.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that one.
Yeah, the one that just came out this last week was that really superseded or outstripped
Yeah.
the first one. But
Amazing.
yeah, what happens is kind of this sense of the video requires attention, requires processing, thinking about it, making notes. This one I can just listen and be passive, and that's easier.
Yep. Which again, like I said, this takes a lot more mental energy, emotional energy. Look into, do you just not have that reserve right now? Is it just more than you can muster? And that's fine if so. It's not that you have to then, suck it up, man, and force yourself to do it. Like, no, just acknowledge that that's why. And then don't take it that you're like beating yourself up over it, that I'm letting myself down or blah, blah, blah. Just recognize that sometimes we need to decompress. When you have a lot of other
Yeah.
stuff going on, it is okay to just let the body rest. And sometimes it's, cozy to just watch David Gilmour talk about, actually, what was it? Oh yeah, it was actually in our last Tuesday meeting that I referenced. I thought it was such a fascinating thing that he said that, in Abbey Road Studios with all the equipment and engineers and stuff that they had, he has never gotten a guitar sound that was actually as good as what he had in his mind.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, if that isn't a perfect example of our minds always one-upping reality and never being at ease with what is and just always trying to improve on it a little bit more, I don't know what is. I mean, that's
Yeah. That man, that's a great point. I had not thought of that. That's very very excellent observation.
yeah,
Hey, I want to mention one thing before I forget.
yeah.
Because I guess I want to I can't remember what the intention was. Earlier, you said something about the good and bad, and what makes me bad and other people good.
Yeah.
And it, it's what that that reminded me of um, that video that Pernilla did a few weeks ago about self-forgiveness.
Hmm.
And as I told you, when I saw that video, I went ahead and ran with it, and I found that, well, first of all, I was able to actually be open to the idea. In the past, when I would hear that kind of stuff, like, "Hey, used to hear that in AA meetings all the time," like, that just sounds like Stuart Smalley,
Yeah,
and
totally.
like, "Ugh, please." So I was open to it. There was no resistance to the idea, which
Yeah.
was pleasantly surprising. But the other thing was that I was able to do it. I could think, I could first of all look at myself in the mirror and say, "I forgive you." And I even tested it. I thought of some things that I have done over the course of my life that, when I thought about them, I just wanted to curl up and try to disappear. And
Exactly.
I could look back on those things and have some compassion and understanding for that teenager, that little kid,
Yeah.
and I could willingly and freely forgive that person and
Wonderful.
myself. And so I spent over a couple of days or so after that video, and taking her suggestion, I worked with it in a number of different ways, and it was never an issue. It was something that there was always this openness to. But this business of other people being good and me being bad makes I can't help but think that there is something that is being missed, something that's being overlooked, with regard to forgiving myself.
Mm.
Because if I'm not okay with myself because of something that I have done, then that would absolutely set up this business of they're good.
Yep. And that's why I said it really helps to have like an accurate, it's not based off anything real, but an accurate idea of the traits that they have, which are good, and the traits that I have, or the activities that I've done, or whatever it is that defines me as bad. You can start by, also defining other people who you think are bad, and then what is it about their behavior or their traits
Hmm.
that you find, aberrant, and then how do I see those in me? In what ways do I does that reflect something here? If I put myself in the same camp as them, we must share some similarities.
Right. Okay. Man, that is a great idea. That's again the kind of stuff that I was trying to think of ways to really look into this and narrow things down, and I could only get so far.
Yeah,
So that's extremely helpful.
good. And then, and we also want to run that the walk the line between being uh completely honest with ourselves, but
Hmm.
also again that self-forgiving acknowledgement that A, it's not currently me. It's something that was based off of conditions that was not in younger Darrell's uh,
Okay.
free will to have done that anyway. So it makes self-forgiveness much, much easier when we really understand that there weren't other options on the table at the time that young Darrell did behave that way. But even that being the case, you can also recognize this is uh, that Darrell does not currently exist, right? We're
Right.
self-forgiving in a way where we're forgiving parts of the story, parts of our memories, parts of our experience that are not currently here, which also makes it easier to do. Um, but when you find that there are traits that you still associate with yourself in some way that are, similar to that dictator who I think is terrible, um, be honest about what it is, but also don't take that on as now you're whipping your own back about it. You know, be compassionate and have that same self-forgiveness that can you accept that this is an element of your behavior the way that you perceive it to be like that. Now, of course, depending on what you find, it might be where yeah, it would be great for everybody's, and I'm saying this maybe not as much to you, but you never know, but definitely to maybe other people who are watching this. There are, there might be things that you find that actually, for the sake of society, would be better if you worked on them, right? Like, there,
Yeah.
it's not just to say like, I'm a raging asshole to everybody and I love that about myself. Like it is okay to also work on these things. You acknowledge that it's there. You accept that this is the way that you're currently behaving based off of all the conditionings that way things are. It couldn't be any other way, but we can start to become more aware and more skillful in our behaviors so that we have, more pro-social interactions with people or whatever it is. So acknowledging what's there, realizing if you are hurting other people, if you are, causing suffering in your life, recognizing that that is not a necessary pattern of behavior, and you can actively take steps to uh, work with that and turn those patterns around. Um, if you notice that you are coloring yourself with traits that again, you see in some outside um, person who you dislike, notice the conceptual nature of that, where you're taking certain activities that you see by them, certain actions, certain traits, and you are generalizing that out. You have probably not done the exact same things yourself.
Hmm.
And if you have, there is still some sort of generalization that's going between that person and this activity. So becoming aware of, like we've talked about already, breaking down the reality of the concept itself is useful at a certain point. So we start by recognizing that, I feel a bit guilty. I feel like I'm a bad person because I am inconsiderate of other people. Okay, great. Acknowledge it. Notice if that really is the case. In what way? Be specific. How could you be more considerate towards others? How could you be more considerate to yourself? Maybe you're also not being considerate to you. Going down all of that, very helpful. But then also we can get to the point where it's like, what am I even talking about? If I'm beating myself up over the idea of being inconsiderate, even that is something which has no inherent nature of its own. It's still a concept. It's still a comparison of how I could behave compared to other people that I see or other things. And, it's, I say this under a little bit of hesitation only because people can take this to mean like, oh, it's great. I can become a total raging sociopath and, and it's not to do that. But notice every one of those concepts, whether it's about positive traits of ours or negative traits of ours, you can dissect and you can have experiences that question how real that concept even is. Fundamentally, where is the reality in that thing which you think you are or should be or shouldn't be or need more of or anything else? It's concept in the mind. And you can really break all of that down. But we want to do it from like an ethical, moral standpoint. So we have some sort of grounding. Otherwise, in Buddhism, there's so much emphasis on morality because of that, because we get to the point where you dissolve everything. And if you don't have that foundation in morality, then you really can become kind of a dangerous actor in the world.
That was, I'm glad to hear you say that because I had come to that conclusion myself some time ago.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the guardrails that keep the system in line. And I think it is really a problem when we have people who come to this stuff who haven't really done any morality work. And I think it explains, at least in part, why you get people who are so abusive and you know, toxic and dangerous when they have any sort of awakening experiences.
Yeah, yeah, I have to agree completely.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's a really inseparable part of the awakening process.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we just, and I mean, if you want to run off and live in a cave for the rest of your life, then fine. I guess it's not that important. But as long as you're engaging in society with other people, it really, really helps.
Yeah, I feel very strongly about that as well. And it's interesting that the one thing that began to open this up for me, even prior to having that experience that evening in the playground that I referenced in our very first conversation,
Mm.
um, prior to that, a few years before, um, I was doing inventory work with my sponsor, and I can't remember the details. I just know we were talking about my mom, which, I'd done a lot of inventory work, so it wasn't the first time. And, here we were going over mom again. And something in that, and I really wish I'd written down, made a journal entry or something about it because I'd love to know what was going on there. But uh, there was this really huge aha moment where I saw that what I do to others, I do to myself. And what I
Yeah,
do to myself, I do to others. I mean,
yeah,
did I say that correctly? The idea is that
yeah,
anything I do to myself or to others, it doesn't happen in a vacuum.
exactly.
So, and I mean, really, it was like the light came on. Whoa. And from
Yeah,
that point on, I mean, there was this incredible drive towards and valuing of um, ethical, moral behavior, not hurting others, and with that came this um, really strong sense of the necessity of honesty. And
yeah,
it was problematic because that was opened up, but my behavior was not in line with it yet. And so I
yeah,
would do and say things on a regular basis. And before it would bother me, but boy, now it was really upsetting. It was intensely upsetting because
yeah.
I really understood in a much deeper way what I was doing.
Yep,
Even if it was just saying something thoughtless and or angry to another person.
yep.
So
It, it everything has a every effect is itself a cause, right?
yes.
Every action has countless reactions.
Hmm.
So, yeah,
Yep.
we do not live in vacuums for sure.
No, and if that part of a person has been woken up, then you know it can become really hard to live with yourself if you're not doing something about these things.
Yep, I can see that. I can absolutely see that.
No, in fact, it's only just become recently where, I mean, not to say that there aren't things I do or say that trouble me, but it's not the to the degree or frequency that it used to be. I can live with myself with a much greater degree of ease than I could in years past.
Isn't it wonderful?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Absolutely, it is. Like I said at the beginning of this conversation, when Susanna told me last week that I really don't seem to get angry anymore. I mean, I'm
yeah,
sure it exists in a milder form, and I've been kind of keeping an eye out because I'm curious about this. But yeah, she's right. I mean, it just doesn't happen the way it did even, say a month or so ago.
that's
And when
it.
she told me that, yes, there's another thing that's been taken off of my back. You
Yep,
know.
yep. I love that. It is really it's helpful, obviously not just for the people around us, but
Hmm.
I think we do the practice because just like you said, it's what you do for yourself, you do, or to yourself, you do to others, and vice versa. So the whole awakening process, is great as it is on the inside, it really has such long and deep lasting ramifications that just
Hmm.
flow out like ripples that
Yeah.
it, I'm so grateful that, we do this kind of work. And
Hmm.
I only hope it can keep expanding because it is just so powerful for bringing some awareness and clarity to people's experience that is just so absolutely necessary.
Hmm.
We're just walking around in this state of absolute delusion most of the time.
Well, that I forget who it was that said it, but some historical figure had said something about, if you want to change the world, you have to change yourself.
Yep,
And that couldn't be any more correct. In fact, I would go so far as to say those people who are doing this work, even though it's much quieter and much more subtle and maybe not as easy to see um, directly, they will have more of a lasting impact on the world than all of these elites and billionaires who are, doing all these really conspicuous and oftentimes ostentatious sorts of things.
absolutely.
Um, that I mean, it's a shame that they have the effects on people's lives that they do, but I just don't see that as being of as much of consequence as
Yeah,
what results from people who quietly are changing themselves and how they interact with the world.
absolutely. Yeah, I agree completely.
Um, well, I think that's a good note to.
I think it is. Yeah, lovely way to end. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, thank you so much. Uh,
yeah. Well, and as always, thank you. I mean, I hope that you have some sense of understanding how much I appreciate and I'm grateful for the generosity that you have with your time.
I do. Thank you. And again, I appreciate you doing this publicly so, everybody else can also benefit from it. So thank you again. And I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I'll talk to you then.
Yeah, keep up the great work.
All right,
Thank
I'll talk to you after a bit.
you. Bye.